Alright, today we're going to talk about the distributive property. Woohoo! When I ask somebody to pass out papers, I'm asking them to distribute it. In math, it means that we're going to take something that is in one container and we're going to pass it out to other numbers. So the I can statement, go ahead and get this written in your notebook. I can use the distributive property to help solve equations. And then this very confusing definition of the distributive property says multiplying a sum or a difference by a number is the same as multiplying each number in the sum or difference. Go ahead and pause the video until you have all of this written down, and then I will get to the explanation part. Okay, hopefully you have it all written down now. Down at the bottom I have this this equation that's all set up. It says that 8 times 4, or I'm sorry, it says that 8 times this quantity. When we have parentheses around something, that's a quantity. So it's saying that if I took 10, take away 4, it's going to be the same thing if I do that first and then multiply it by 8, compared to if I did 8 times 10, 8 times 4, and then subtracted it. It's called the distributive property. I'm taking this 8 and I'm distributing it to the 10 and the 4 over on this side. So I'm breaking it apart. So we can use this with the math problem, 8 times 5 minus 8 times 2. We can just write it in a different way using that distributive property. Now in our heads, we can easily do 8 times 5 is 40, and 8 times 2 is 16, and then do the math for that. That would work just fine. But the distributive property offers a way to kind of make things easier. And you know I'm all about the make things easier. So I noticed that in each set of parentheses, there's an 8. When you see something like that with a subtraction sign in the middle, we can take that 8 out. We're going to filter it out. It's going to come all the way to the front. And then I can go ahead and say, all right, I'm going to multiply it by what's left, but I have to put my parentheses around it. Well, what's left? I have this 5 and I have this 2. So in my parentheses, I'm going to take that 5 and I'm going to take that 2 and I'm going to write it like that. So it's just showing you, hey, we can do a simpler math problem. We can take 5, take away 2 first, which we can do in our head. 5 take away 2 is 3. And we could do 8 times 3. They say that that's easier than doing 40 take away 16. Sometimes they don't give you an equation that have 2 numbers that you can go ahead and pick out right away. Sometimes they really want to make the problem a little bit easier, something easier for us to work with, make our lives simpler. So in this situation where they say use the distributive property to rewrite this, they're just trying to get your brain to think of it in a different way, to break up those numbers, to be able to say, oh, well, I know that I can multiply 300 pretty easily. So what if I took 300 and we're going to put them in 2 different sets of parentheses, and I put that 7 over here. It would be true that this 300 is going to, if I added it to the 7, I would get this number right up here. It is true. Then I'm going to go ahead and break apart my 13, and I'm going to say, hey, my 13, oops, I don't want it in yellow. My 13 would be so much easier to use if, you know, I put part of it here, the 10, and then I think, ooh, what would be the other part? 10 plus what equals that 13 up top here? I put a 3 up here. And because there's a multiplication sign here, I'm going to multiply. And I split these two things up. I took 300 and just broke the 7 out here So I'm going to have to eventually put them back together. The same thing with the 10. I took the 10 and broke it apart with the 3 over here. I'm going to need to put it back together, and that's why I choose a plus sign. So I can do that math a little easier in my head. I can say, oh, okay, 300 times 10. Well, drop my zeros. I have 1, 2, 3 zeros. So when I do the multiplication, of course, I'm going to have 3 zeros. And then I look at my front number. I have a 3 times a 1. I'm going to put a 3 in the front. And then I need to think about, okay, well, what am I going to plus? Well, I should know in my head that 7 times 3 is 21. So I'm going to put that 21 down below. And now I can get a total of 3,000 plus 21, which would equal 3,021. Okay, so if we look at this problem, they've already split it out for you. They say, hey, we have this problem here, 4 times 62. We're going to split it apart. Well, if we take that 4 times, how are we going to break that 62 apart? So we have a 4 times something, and then we have a 4 times 2. Well, if we know there's a 2 here, if we break that apart from that 62, what's left? What will n equal? That's right, it should equal 60. It should equal 60 because 60 plus that 2 is going to equal this 62. And to have the same problem, that's what you're going to have to use. Alright, today you're going to see problems like this on your class kick. They're going to ask you to use the distributive property. Now I know that we could easily go ahead and multiply this on paper, write it down, and do our process for multiplication. But today I want you to use that distributive property. They've put it in there because it's going to make things easier for you. So you think, okay, I'm gonna split this into 2 separate groups. I'm gonna have a group here, and I'm gonna have a group here, and I'm going to add these groups. So if I start with this 54, how could I break it apart so that it'll make it easier? Well, anything that ends in a 0 is going to make my life easier. So if I go ahead and I split that 54 and say, okay, I'll put 50 here and I'll put 4 over here, that would definitely make my life easier. And then I'm going to put my multiplication signs in the middle. And I'm already done with the 50. I split it to be 50 and 4. Now I'm going to think about this 67 here. How could I split that 67? Well, like I said, anything that ends in 0 is going to be easier to work with. So let's take 60 and put it over here, and we could put the 7 over here. So when I multiply, I think, okay, I have 1, 2 zeros. So I'm going to drop down 2 zeros, and then 5 times 6 is 30. I have 4 times 7, 28, and my answer should be, oh, trying to just rewrite 3,000, that's not right. My answer should be 3,028 when I add them together. Okay, so you're going to use this on your class kick. Go ahead and get on over to your class kick. The codes will be posted up on the board. You're going to use the distributive property. If it says use this property, you need to use it. The secret word for today is going to be Halloween. Go ahead and write it on your class kick. Do not ask me if I saw it on your class kick, because I will be upset. Also, I'm going to ask if you watched all the way to the end of this video, because if you do not watch all the way to the end of this video, I'm going to be very upset. So, go ahead and take care of that, and happy mathing!